It seems there was a much-married woman who walked into a bridal shop one day and told the sales clerk that she was looking for a wedding gown for her 4th wedding. "Well," replied the sales clerk, "exactly what type of dress are you looking for?" "A long, frilly white dress with a veil," she replied. The sales clerk didn't quite know what to say. "Frankly, madam, dresses of that nature are considered more appropriate for brides who are being married for the first time, for those who are a bit more innocent, if you know what I mean." "Well," replied the customer, more than a little put out, "I can assure you that I'm as innocent as the rest of them. Believe it or not, despite all my marriages, I remain as innocent as any first-time bride. You see," she went on, "my first husband was a dear, sweet man. Unfortunately, all the excitement of the wedding was simply too much for him, and he died as we checked into the hotel on our wedding night." "I'm so sorry to hear that," said the sales clerk, "but what about the others?" "Well, my second husband and I got into a terrible fight in the limousine on the way to our wedding reception. We haven't spoken since and got the marriage annulled quickly." "Well, what about your third husband?" asked the sales clerk. "Well," said the woman, "he was a Democrat. And every night for 4 years, he just sat on the edge of the bed and told me how good it was going to be." Every politician makes a career out of telling voters how good it is going to be. The greatest make us believe it. As poignant as Reagan's handwritten letter to the American people revealing his Alzheimer's disease are the final scrawled lines of a speech set for delivery on April 13th, 1945. Quote, "The only limit to our realization of tomorrow," wrote Franklin Roosevelt in the twilight of his life, "will be our doubts of today. Let us move forward with strong and active faith." While other presidential reputations bounce around like corn in a popper, Roosevelt and Reagan seem assured of history's notice and posterity's gratitude. If you doubt my word, just pay a visit to the nation's capital. We're not far from Ronald Reagan National Airport and the Ronald Reagan International Trade Center. You can experience Washington's newest and most popular monument, a moving tribute in granite and bronze to the president who redefined the presidency, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Thank you very much. Now, we've got a few minutes, I think, in case anyone has questions, comments, observations, or if you just want to get into an argument. Yeah?
With all this about presidents, how did you ever write a book about Colonel Montgomery?
Well, he thought he was more important than a mere president. Seriously, he thought that, after all, presidents come and go every 4 or 8 years. But the publisher of the Chicago Tribune, I mean, publishers shape and mold public opinion. Publishers tell presidents what they should do. That's what he thought. The voters disproved him on several occasions. Yeah?
Your personal favorite and why, the president?
It's a fair question, but it's almost impossible to answer. I have such quirky tastes. I'm a great admirer of Woodrow Wilson, but I'm a great admirer of Calvin Coolidge. Probably George Washington is truly the indispensable man. I could do without Andrew Jackson. Anyone who knows me thinks I regard Franklin Pierce as the best argument against democracy that I can think of. We had a string of mediocrities before the Civil War, but you know, the great blessing in this country, call it providential, call it coincidence, is in times of great crisis, we have been blessed with leaders, whatever their party, whatever their ideology, who have been able to inspire us to the best within us. And, you know, as I said the other day, the genius of democracy in America is it's a self-correcting mechanism. Presidents help, there's no doubt about that. Every single president wants to do his best. No one wants to be Franklin Pierce. He probably wanted to do his best too. But I'm discovering James Madison. I'll tell you, the older I get, now that's interesting, the older I get, for example, I would not want to be stuck on a desert island with Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, he's very entertaining to read about. He's a wonderful, galloping, swashbuckling, colorful figure. But I mean, he would suck all the air out of a room. On the other hand, William Howard Taft is a delightfully mellow, wry figure who never really wanted to be a politician, really had a judicial temperament, and could step back and see the humor and the absurdities of the political mind. So I guess the older I get, I'm more of a Taftite and less of a TR. Yeah.
You were head of the Hoover Presidential Museum for a while. Is he still as misunderstood as I think he is?
He is. You know, in the end, you do what you can do. This was a man, well, he needs Steven Spielberg to do for him what Spielberg did for John Quincy Adams. You know, he needs to make a movie. Herbert Hoover fed 1 billion people in 55 countries around the world. He organized the first international relief effort in World War I. The Commission for the Relief of Belgium kept 10 million people from starving to death. And you know what the administrative overhead was? 0.3%. Voluntarism. He came home, ran the American Food Administration. It was all voluntary. Public relations. Food will win the war. Wheatless Wednesdays. Meatless Mondays. The administrative overhead was less than 0.5%. So you can understand why, when he became president, he believed in the generosity and the goodness of the American people. He said all you had to do is spell out the need, and they were the most generous people on earth. They would respond. The problem was no one could imagine a need as great or crippling or pervasive or enduring as the Great Depression. And ironically, the very idealism, the conviction in the goodness of the American people that raised Hoover to the presidency became a ball and chain that hobbled him at a time when the rules changed. Overnight, what we wanted from a president was very different. And he couldn't give us this. Partly, you know, we're all products of our upbringing. Woodrow Wilson said, "A boy never outgrows his boyhood." Herbert Hoover was an orphan Quaker who remembered to the end of his life sitting in an unheated Iowa meeting house, his feet not touching the floor. He said later he was 10 years old before he realized he could do something for pleasure without offending God. Yeah.
The current threat from the Mideast against not only the United States but many other countries, what do you see, or how do you see the resolution of this thing, and how we can defend ourselves, and what the ultimate outcome is going to be? It's a tough one to call.
It's more than a tough one to call. If I knew that, I'd be on the Iraq study group. That's outside my field of expertise. Very important in life to know your limitations. I don't drive a car, and I don't advise people on the Middle East. Yeah.
Is there any evidence that Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's disease was progressing?
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a good question, and it's come up, you know. It was whispered then. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. But it's interesting. Somewhere there is a name. Maybe it's just getting old. There are people, Edmund Morris is one, who believe that Reagan was never quite as buoyant after the assassination attempt. Although he bounced back and functioned fine, that in some ways, it took something out of him that he really never regained.